Harley just rolled a brand new model onto the Sturgis stage with a big name and a bigger number, 17,999 on the tag. But the first real invoices coming out of dealers tell a different story. Once freight, setup, and mandatory add-ons hit, riders are staring at 20 grand for a mid-year bike that still carries the same old heat, seat, and suspension complaints. In this video, we're going to lay out the receipts, the launch price sheet, a real out-the-door invoice, dealer guidance on how they were told to sell this thing, and what veteran riders are already finding once they get the Deadwood home. Watch till the end, because in this video, you'll know exactly why so many riders at Sturgis walked away from this new bike shaking their heads, and whether it still deserves your money. Sturgis launch. Harley rolled the Deadwood out under the Sturgis lights like it was salvation. A fresh name, a lot of smoke, and a sticker that hits you right in the gut. $17,999. That is the launch price stamped on the official sheet for a mid-year model arriving on August 7th, right in the middle of the rally. No early spring buildup, no full model year reset. Just a late drop, dressed sharp, aimed straight at riders who still want a traditional big twin sitting in the garage. The way the company framed it, the Deadwood is supposed to be a new answer for the kind of rider who spends long days in the saddle. Sturgis is the perfect backdrop for that promise. 500,000 people roll through. Dealers throw everything they have at the crowd, and every brand wants the loudest tent. So Harley drops a fresh badge, slaps a near 18 grand price tag on it, and lets the spotlights do the talking. The first thing older riders do, though, is not stare at the paint. They do the math. $17,999 is serious money for someone living on a pension, a disability check, or a fixed retirement income. That kind of price puts it squarely against well-kept, used touring rigs that have already proved they can cross states without drama. When the bulletin calls it accessible, a lot of riders just shake their heads and start comparing what that money really buys in the real world. The number is not what stings most. It is the fact that Harley is asking that money in the middle of the year, while a stack of problems riders have shouted about for seasons still sits there untouched. Leading straight into the real question riders are asking in every parking lot around Sturgis. If the company can launch a brand new Deadwood at that price, why are the same old complaints still hanging over the lineup? What hurts most? Ask around the campgrounds and bar lots, and the same complaints keep coming up. Riders talk about heat on the legs during summer runs. They talk about stock seats that feel fine at the dealership and turn punishing after a few hundred miles. They bring up suspension that blows through its travel on rough back roads, and dealer service bills that climb higher every season. None of that is secret. A big rider forum ran a poll earlier in the year asking what owners most wanted Harley to fix. The top answers were simple and blunt. Real touring comfort, better out-of-the-crate suspension, lower long-term service costs, and clearer support once the warranty clock runs out. Those are not internet-only gripes. That is the sort of thing you hear from someone who has ridden cross-country more than once and knows exactly where a bike starts to fall apart. When a rider says the machine is great for coffee runs, but not for 12-hour days, that is not whining. That is experience talking. The frustration comes from feeling like that experience is being ignored. People remember when older touring rigs were built to haul a couple, bags, and a trunk for days without feeling like a fashion statement. They look at new brochures and see more focus on paint packages and brand lifestyle than on the problems owners have already pointed out simply. Which is why the reveal itself hit such a nerve, because the show under those lights told a very different story about what the company chose to fix and what it left alone. If you appreciate straight talk from riders, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments whether Harley still earns your money. Marketing over miles. At the reveal, the Deadwood looked sharp under the ghim. Spotlights, fresh paint schemes, some blacked-out hardware, a few trim touches that play well in photos, and a launch package stacked with branded add-ons. On paper, there are updates, sure. Different finish here, revised bar setup there, a small tweak to controls that makes for a good talking point in a scripted walkaround. A reporter who sat through the reveal wrote notes that read like a fashion sheet. Color options, badging, special edition trim, accessory bundles ready for order on day one. What did not jump out in those notes were the things riders actually rank highest when money is real and roads are long. No headline change to the seat that so many owners swap out within the first season. No major revision to rear suspension travel or damping tuned for loaded touring, instead of quick test rides. No clear move on cooling that takes the edge off stop, and go traffic in August heat. The message on stage leaned hard on how the bike looks, and how it fits into a story, not how it solves problems riders have been reporting for years. Once the music fades and the tent empties, everything moves back to where the truth always comes out for a new model: the dealer floor, the finance office, and the final number printed at the bottom of that sales sheet. Mid-year play. There is a reason the Deadwood showed up in the middle of the year instead of anchoring a full model year lineup. Mid-year drops are a classic way for a company to spike attention and squeeze more revenue from an existing platform without reworking the foundation. Paint, trim, bundles, a new name, and a heavily scripted reveal at a big rally. The leaked dealer guidance floating around ahead of Sturgis spelled it out in calm, careful language. Position the Deadwood as fresh and desirable, use rally buzz, focus on limited availability and strong branding. Keep the talk on lifestyle and image, not on internal changes that do not exist. From the dealer side, a mid-year model like this can be a useful tool. It gives sales staff something new to point at when buyers walk past rows of familiar machines. It can justify a firmer stance on price, especially when framed as a rally launch model with a story attached to it. The memo language made one thing clear. The goal is to protect margins and keep the brand in the headlines through the back half of the year. There was not much in there about addressing rider complaints beyond a line or two about refined experience. Once a buyer sits down across from the finance desk and starts adding fees, that mid-year strategy shows its real teeth, because the question waiting there is simple and cold. How far north of $17,999 does the out-the-door number climb when the ink finally dries? Sticker shock. Walk into a dealer with that Deadwood on the floor, and the first number you see is the same one Harley showed at Sturgis. $17,999 on the tag. That is the headline. That is the story the factory wants stuck in your head. For someone who lived through cheaper eras, that figure already feels heavy. Still, a lot of riders shrug and think, if it is worth it, I will find a way. The trouble starts once you sit down at the desk and the real numbers come out. An anonymized invoice from an early Deadwood deal tells the story line by line. Freight, setup, documentation fee, a dealer-installed accessory package you never asked for, rolled right into the offer. Sometimes there is a paint protection add-on, or a branded cover, or a security bundle already mounted, so it feels rude to say no. None of those charges appeared in the big launch moment at Sturgis. All of them live in that cramped little office where the pen finally hits paper. $17,999 turns into $19,000 or $20,000 before you catch your breath. The buyer might fight a few fees down, but most riders are not trained negotiators. They are there because they love V-twins and open roads. Dealers know that. So the whole Deadwood launch structure leans on emotion and timing first, then on finance math second. Rally buzz does the lifting outside. Quiet pressure does the rest inside. Once that monthly number is locked in, the question changes. It stops being, can I swing this payment right now, and turns into, what is this really going to cost over the next 10 years of my life on the road? Miles versus money. Most seasoned riders do not judge a machine by the first weekend. They judge it by the first decade. Years and miles tell the truth that brochures never will. When those riders look at a Deadwood for $17,999, they are already running a different table in their heads. Oil changes, tire life, brake pads, common wear parts. Average shop rate. If they do not wrench everything themselves, lay that out on paper and the picture sharpens fast. A typical service schedule on a modern touring bike means at least one major service a year if you rack real miles. Base labor rates at many dealers are higher than they have ever been. Add in parts that often come only through official channels, and you find yourself dropping several $100s a visit, sometimes more. Over 5 or 6 years, that stacks into thousands on top of the payment, on top of insurance, on top of the gear every responsible rider keeps replacing as it wears. Questions about that reality are not just being whispered in garages. Dealers themselves are dealing with those same concerns from buyers all day long. Showroom truths. Out on the dealer floors around Sturgis, the Deadwood drew plenty of eyes. Sales staff were trained on the talking points well before the rally. Fresh styling, rally launch story, strong brand heritage. A few dealers who sent preview notes described the mood as cautiously optimistic. A new name helps bring people through the door. A Sturgis tie-in is easy to sell as a moment riders will remember. Underneath that energy, though, the comments turned sharper. Some salespeople noted that older riders asked far more pointed questions than the younger crowd. They wanted to know about heat, seat height, suspension travel, and out-the-door pricing instead of paint names and lifestyle phrases. Several preview reports mentioned the same pattern. Enthusiasm at first glance, a pause at the price. Then a slower, more hesitant conversation when buyers realized how little had changed where it really counts. Those quiet worries lead straight into the one part of the deal Harley never puts on a stage at Sturgis, but every serious rider should read line by line before signing anything. Warranty reality. Warranty language looks comforting at first glance. 2 or 3 years of coverage sounds solid when you have just spent $17,999 on a new bike. An anonymized claim story from a recent touring owner shows how thin that comfort can get. In that case, a recurring problem cropped up just outside a local riding season. The dealer agreed it was a warrantable repair. Parts had to be ordered. Shop schedule was packed. The bike sat for weeks, waiting on pieces and lift space. The owner missed a chunk of prime weather while the clock quietly ticked. None of that delay shows up in the glossy line that says, "Covered." Warranty takes care of some parts and some labor, but never covers time lost. It does not pay for the rentals, the rides with friends that did not happen, or the rally trip canceled because the machine was sitting half apart in a back bay. On top of that, many riders have discovered the boundaries of coverage the hard way. Certain wear items, certain modifications. Any hint that the failure does not fit the narrow terms, and the whole bill swings right back into the owner's lap. Once a rider realizes that money, warranty, and service can all fall short at the same time, focus shifts away from stage lights and paint codes. The next question becomes brutally simple. If the costs are high and support is shaky, how does the Deadwood actually feel when you are deep into a long, hot day on the road? Paint over pain. The story Harley told at Sturgis was not about bolts or bearings. It was about a feeling. The marketing team's own brief laid it out. Deadwood should capture the spirit of the rally town at sunset and honor the long road from Main Street to the Black Hills. That is pure image. A stylist who worked on the project described the goal in simple terms. Make a bike that looks right in front of a historic saloon and still pops in a dealership under fluorescent lights. So, the Deadwood comes wrapped in deep, nostalgic paint schemes. One finish echoes the old brick and neon of Sturgis at night, with dark metal flake that only really shows under harsh light. Another trim package leans hard into that stripped outlaw touring vibe. Less chrome, more shadow, blacked out pieces. That whisper instead of shout. The tank badge is shaped to nod at older logos, without copying them exactly. Under stage lighting, it all works. Cameras love it. Every angle looks like it was built for a poster in a garage. Once the spotlights switch off and the crowd drifts back toward the campgrounds, pride gives way to a harder question. Does that carefully crafted look still matter once you are a few hundred miles from Sturgis with the sun dropping and the highway stretching out in front of you? If you want more honest breakdowns like this, hit subscribe before you click away. That single step tells the algorithm riders still care about truth over hype, and it helps make sure you see the next video when it lands. The missing fix. A rider who took a Deadwood demo out for a long loop during the rally kept a simple notebook. Start time, odometer reading, quick notes at fuel stops. At first, everything looked promising. Short hops around town made the seat feel acceptable. Around the first hour mark, though, comments changed. Hips starting to ache. Lower back feeling every bump. By the third hour, the notes boiled down to a single line. Stock seat has to go. That diary read a lot like what riders have already said about other recent touring models. The reach to the bars felt familiar. Foot position was what you expect from this family of bikes. Rear suspension still struggled with broken pavement once you added a bit of luggage and a passenger. None of that suggests disaster. It just tells a clear truth. Ergonomics and suspension on the Deadwood remain very close to what long-haul riders have been complaining about for years. The core shape and hardware have not moved far enough to truly change the comfort story. If Harley did not pour real effort into easing those pain points on the Deadwood, it raises another question. Where did the engineering time go? And what did the factory choose to modernize instead? Controls and tech. Once you swing a leg over the Deadwood and start living with it day to day, the small details become louder. Controls, display, storage, and simple usability either make your life easier or slowly drive you crazy. A side-by-side comparison with a solid non-electric rival in the same price neighborhood tells a clear story. The rival might run a more traditional analog cluster backed by a modest information screen, while the Deadwood leans into a more polished digital layout, with smoother menus and nicer graphics. Hand controls on the Harley feel slightly more refined, with a bit more thought put into switch placement. New touches include a better trip computer, cleaner navigation cues, and smarter charging options. Those matter when you actually travel. Nobody wants clumsy menus with gloves or hunting for power. Practical riders value any time saved. From that angle, the Deadwood works. Yet rivals match or even beat it easily. Questions like that start to sharpen the eye for detail, which means riders and independent shops begin looking very closely at how well all of these new pieces are actually put together. Early red flags. An independent shop that does pre-purchase inspections on a lot of big twins put a few early Deadwoods up on a lift. The mechanic there has no reason to flatter or slam any brand. His job is to tell buyers what he sees. On the first bike, he noticed small alignment issues on one of the bags, with a latch that needed extra force to close cleanly. The second bike showed a minor paint inconsistency under the fairing where most owners would never look, but a veteran eye spotted it immediately. An accessory bracket on a third unit sat just a touch out of square until he loosened and retorqued it. None of those things make a bike unrideable. They do, however, chip away at the sense that a machine priced at $17,999 should feel locked down and flawless out of the crate. When riders are already paying a premium for a mid-year launch, little signs of rushed assembly or loose tolerances land harder. Early reliability questions are not always about catastrophic failure. They begin with these small signals that suggest corners being trimmed to hit deadlines and margin targets. Once those stories hit local rider circles and online forums, the conversation around a new model changes from "Did you see that new Deadwood?" to Have you heard what people are finding once they get them home? Forum fire. Once the Deadwood hype faded a little, the real verdict started piling up where it always does. In rider forums and in quiet conversations at small-town dealerships. A curated snapshot of one large online thread told the story in a few hard lines. The top comments were not raging about the paint or the name. They hammered the same points you heard at Sturgis. Mid-year model, same old seat. Price of a real tourer, comfort of a bar hopper. Nice to look at, nothing fixed. The tone was not childish outrage. It was weary disappointment from people who know how many miles it takes to uncover a weak spot. Their comparisons hit hard because they came from riders who owned older tourers, knew the real costs, and had ridden enough years to spot empty marketing. Once that kind of mood settles in, other companies smell blood in the water. They start sharpening their own pitch, especially in a place like Sturgis, where half the industry sets up shop in the same patch of prairie. Rivals move in. Walk the vendor rows at Sturgis during a year like this, and you see how fast competitors adjust their aim. While the Deadwood enjoys its stage time, rival brands pin simple flyers to their tents. Touring package discount. Free upgraded seat with purchase. Extended service plan included. A few dealers from other manufacturers talked openly about timing those offers to hit, right when Harley riders are asking questions about price versus value. One competing touring rig sat under a plain canopy with a hand-lettered sign hanging off the bars. Set up for the long haul. Ask about mileage, not marketing. Corny? Maybe. Yet it pulled in gray-bearded riders who have spent enough nights in cheap motels to know exactly what that line means. Technically, the machines may not be as iconic. Culturally, though, they are positioning themselves as the choice for people who care more about comfort and reliability than about being seen outside a famous bar. Once you look past the tents and stage lights, you start seeing the supply and labor pressure that leads to a mid-year model like the Deadwood instead of a real generational leap. Boardroom math. Industry analysts have been blunt about it. A mid-year model heavy on shared parts and light on engineering changes is usually a signal of tight supplier contracts and cost control, not creative breakthrough. An anonymized memo from one part supplier mentioned increased material prices, specific volume commitments, and firm delivery windows stretched over several seasons. Those deals make it much easier to repackage what you already have than to design something new from the ground up. Inside the factory, labor dynamics shape the outcome too. Reworking a frame, redesigning suspension architecture, or overhauling cooling takes serious engineering hours, and retraining on the line. That costs real money. Swapping finishes, tweaking controls, bundling accessories, and changing badges can be slotted into existing workflows with less disruption. When analysts talk about leveraging the platform, that is the polite way of saying the board chose the cheaper path. For a company answering to investors as well as riders, that temptation grows every year. That is where heritage and trust come into play. Because a brand built on long-haul loyalty cannot live forever on image while leaving riders to carry the practical load alone. What to do now? Riders are not powerless spectators in this story. Every purchase, trade, and hold decision sends a message. Resale data already hints at that. Projections from used market watchers show stronger values clinging to models known for comfort and longevity, even if they lack flashy launches, while cosmetically hyped mid-year bikes can soften faster once the shine fades. One forum organized an informal Hold Your Money campaign around the Deadwood. Members there urged others to wait, buy used, or invest in older, proven tourers, instead of jumping on a fresh badge that did not fix their main complaints. In the end, the Deadwood's launch becomes a kind of test, not just of Harley's strategy, but of how serious riders are about defending their wallets and their standards. If a high-priced mid-year model that leaves core problems untouched still sells out, the board will keep playing that card. If enough riders pause, question, and demand more than fresh paint and a new name, the message will be hard to ignore. The real future of big twins will not be decided under stage lights in Sturgis, but in all the garages where riders quietly choose what deserves a place beside their old faithful machines. Harley can call the deadwood accessible and dress it in all the heritage paint they want. But out on the road, the only thing that counts is miles, comfort, and what it really costs you over the years. I've laid out what I'm seeing. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your experience in the comments, hit like if this helped, and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive for real riders.